Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very early and very brief edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and I'm coming to you that's so early on a Sunday morning. It's 6 a.m. because I signed up to help the Washington Trail Association fix some part of a trail up in the North Cascades. I've got an hour and a half drive ahead of me. I got to get fed and out the door here in about 25 minutes. So I'm going to have to scoot on this one pretty quick, but got to keep the streak alive and wouldn't be able to do this later today because it's an all day thing and I got family stuff after that. So let's get to it. I did a week one preview of the Denver Broncos and learned some stuff along the way. I was listening to some week two podcasts on our opponents yesterday, and I'll share some of what I heard there, as well as just some brief information about the Patriots. The Patriots, as folks probably know, were not good last year. They were 4-13. It was Bill Belichick's last year as head coach, and he is replaced by Gerard Mayo, in-house replacement, someone that Robert Kraft handpicked, the owner. And Robert Kraft has kind of been acting a little bit as the GM as well for the longest period of time. Elliot Kraft, or sorry, is it Elliot Kraft? Elliot Wolf. I knew it wasn't Elliot Kraft. Elliot Wolf has been not quite named the GM. He is the director of scouting. It even on Pro Football Reference, it references him as the de facto GM. So a little bit of an odd setup there. Robert Kraft taking more of a hands-on approach as he is older and transitioning from Belichick. Word is that he did not want to take a deal for the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick in the draft because he wants to win now and he wants to get a franchise quarterback. So I think that was one of the worst moves of this offseason. It was the Patriots actually picking in that with that first pick of the 2024 draft. I think they could have gotten an absolute haul for that pick, but they chose to go to stick with it. So we'll see. They have to hope that Drake May turns out to be the franchise quarterback they're looking for. I will go through a couple other things about the Patriots if you didn't know. So last year, they were one of the league's worst offenses. They ranked 31st in points scored, 30th in yards gained. They were 32nd, dead last in points per drive, 31st in yards per drive, 32nd in plays per drive, 32nd in time per drive. This was just a very, 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 very bad offense. They were 30th in interceptions. They threw 21 interceptions last year. They were 27th in touchdown passes with only 16. They were 25th in yards per carry on rushing and 26th in rushing yards overall. So not good offensively. You might be wondering who were their best players on offense last year. Well, their number 1 graded player by PFF was Trent Brown, one of their tackles, who is no longer on the team. Their next highest graded player was Demario Douglas, and I'm not sure that he is still on the team. I don't know. I'll have to double check that. But this is not a an offense that has struck fear in the hearts of anybody. The 4th highest graded player on the Patriots offense last year, Pharaoh Brown, who is now a Seahawk. So he will be making his return to Foxborough for this game. One of the things I heard when I was listening to this Patriots podcast, a couple different Patriots podcasts, there seems to be a pretty good bet that Drake May will not start the season as the quarterback. I think I was actually wanting to look and see whether there's any odds here. As of this is a little bit older. This is May. But the odds were at that time that Jacoby Brissett had a 75% chance to be the starter week 1. From what I'm hearing, they are splitting snaps they were splitting snaps in minicamp, and they also sounded like they intended to continue to split snaps through training camp and even during the season potentially, because the commitment is to develop Drake May even if he's not the starter. Kind of an interesting spot for Jacoby Brissett. I mean, he'll take the start where he can get him, but going into a position where he knows he's going to split snaps and split reps even into the season is not necessarily the best way for him to succeed. And he knows his time is limited, but you take the jobs where you can get him. And if he can play really well, then he'll either earn more snaps in New England or he will earn a big paycheck somewhere else. So we'll see about that. The other piece that came up in the conversation about the Patriots is that when asked if the Patriots got better or worse, it was an interesting conversation. The folks discussing said, based on what they saw in minicamp, the Patriots are worse. And primarily why they felt they were worse is the offensive line. The offensive line went through a pretty big shift this offseason. So as I mentioned, Trent Brown left for them. He was their best offensive lineman. Pharaoh Brown left, who was one of their best blocking tight ends. And as far as who they added, I mean, we'll talk about their draft picks in a second, but they added where's his name? There's a guy, Nick Leverett and Chukwuma Okorafor, to very small deals. And if you look at the Patriots depth chart as it currently stands, it's not pretty. So their starting offensive line predicted right now is left tackle would be Chukwuma Okorafor. Honestly, folks, I've never heard of him. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I honestly have not. So I'm going to look him up. There he is. He played for Pittsburgh for the last 6 years. He never had a PFF grade above 62. I mean, he is just as straight average as you can get. And if you look at where was he getting snaps? All at right tackle. So that's a little interesting. Although what I think I heard on the pod was that he was playing at right tackle and that Michael Onwenu, who they re-signed and is one of their better offensive linemen, was actually, they expected he might be playing left tackle. He had moved to play right guard. So it was Onwenu next to Okorafor on the right side. And I think that meant that their left tackle might have been Caden Wallace. I mean, it sounded really grim. Right guard, Cole Strange, Saidi Sow. These are literal names of their offensive linemen. David Andrews, the center, is a good lineman, but it sounded like the offensive line was an absolute disaster. Even in mini camps where they weren't in pads. So That didn't sound great. It sounded like the quarterback play was okay, but, there was a lot of inconsistency. They did talk quite a bit about Jalen Polk, and that Jalen Polk, the Husky, had a good minicamp, finished their minicamp with a diving full stretch touchdown catch. And they were glowing about Jalen Polk. They really like him. So it will be fun to watch Polk in that game. But the wide receiver room for the Patriots, I mean, these are the wide receiver names, folks. I just mentioned Jalen Polk, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Jalen Rieger, Javon Baker, who I do like, a draft pick, KJ Osborne, Juju Smith-Schuster, you may know, but they were pretty sure Juju Smith-Schuster was not going to make the team. They've got a ridiculous amount of wide receivers on this roster. They have 12 wide receivers on this roster as it stands. I have a feeling they're just like throwing things against the wall. So you've got a really pretty weak wide receiver room, a really challenged offensive line. And then the quarterback position is questionable. So the offense, not great. And I mean, if you're wanting the Seahawks to have a soft start for the defense on the road, you got it. I don't think there's any possible way that the Patriots are going to be a highly functional offense by week 2 of this season. And I think it's most likely the Seahawks will be playing Jacoby Brissett as the starter. And I think that's fine. I'd rather see Drake May see 2 rookie quarterbacks back to back, but I think Jacoby Brissett is likely to be that starter. You may also know or not know Joe Milton was one of their draft picks. So he is also on the roster, although it does sound like he is not really getting any snaps so far, which is interesting to hear. Other things that I heard was that a draft pick from last year, Keon White, has really been standing out as an edge rusher. They are moving to a little bit of a different defense. He is more of a stand-up edge now as opposed to a hand in the ground. They're having some contract issues. Matthew Judon, one of their best players on defense, is in a contract dispute, and there are some rumors that they will trade him. And I got from a betting site that sent it to me that the Seahawks are actually the number 1 most likely destination for Matthew Judon if he is traded. I find that hard to believe. Matthew Judon, although he's a very good pass rusher, is 32 years old. I do not think the Seahawks are going to be looking to add older veteran players, especially high-cost veteran players, at this point. I don't think the Seahawks are at the point where they just need a couple pieces to contend. So I don't think Judon's a likely candidate for the Seahawks. But I mean, this is a guy that had 15 and a half sacks in 2022, 12 and a half sacks in 2021. He has had, 66 and a half sacks over his career. So he's very productive edge rusher. I don't think he's coming to Seattle, but it is just worth knowing that there's some contract issues there. And the other piece there, they just gave Christian Barmore, who is a defensive tackle you may not know, but you should. I've learned about him more this offseason. He's a very productive interior player. So he just got a new deal, and that's causing a bit of a ripple effect across the roster in terms of wanting contracts. In fact, his interior tackle mate, Davon Godchow, their nose tackle, is currently holding in asking for a new deal. Bill Belichick once referred to Davon Godchow as one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. So even though, again, probably not a guy that we have heard a lot about, this is a guy that they think pretty highly of. And in fact, Gerard Mayo made kind of an interesting statement. Not necessarily the smartest thing as a head coach, but he said that he's going to have to get more involved in contract situations to make sure, and said that he wants to help Godchow get his new deal. That is not that is not the way you want your coach to be negotiating against your own front office in the press. So yeah, I think they're figuring things out there in New England. By the way, PFF does not agree with Bill Belichick. They had Godchow as a 50 graded player last year. But they do, like I said, they have a couple of questions there. They do feel pretty good about Keon White, assuming Judon's there. Keon White and Judon represent pretty good edge rushers. Dietrich Wise is also there and can be productive. Josh Uche is a pretty productive pass rusher as well. So they've got some guys that can get after the quarterback. And this was, as much as I was telling you how bad the offense was last year, the defense ranked 15th in points allowed, 7th in yards allowed. They were 5th in the amount of first downs they gave up per game or for the year. 4th in the amount of passing touchdowns that they gave up. They were 4th in the amount of rushing yards that they gave up. Now, I think that's a little misleading but they were number 1 in rushing yards per carry against. They only gave up 3.3 yards per carry on defense. They were 5th in points per drive, 3rd in yards per drive on defense. So this was a very, very good defense for the Patriots last year. Even if, we haven't heard as much about some of these guys, this was this is a very, very good defense. I think will be a better defense than what the Seahawks will play in week 1. So the offense will have their hands full. The offensive line will have their hands full. If the Seahawks do want to be a better run team this year, it'll be harder to do against this particular team. Some other names to be aware of: Christian Gonzalez, most likely their best cornerback, missed most of last year due to injury, but he was off to a fantastic start. He's a very good player. They also have, Jonathan Jones is another player, although there's some question in the conversations I was listening to about whether or not they might be looking to move Jonathan Jones, depending on whether some of the younger corners step forward. But we'll see about that. Jabril Peppers at free safety is a good player and one to know. And then their nickelback Marcus Jones as well. Decent player, nothing special, but decent. So yeah, Jonathan Jones and Christian Gonzalez, assuming they are both there, these are both above average corners to very good corners. So I think it's going to be actually a better cornerback room that the Seahawks will face in week 2 than what they will face in week 1. Patrick Surtain, as much as he's a great player, is only one guy, and the other Broncos cornerbacks are not to his level. As far as changes for the Patriots over the offseason, just so you kind of know, of the guys that are worth mentioning, I talked about Trent Brown leaving as a big one. Mac Jones, their quarterback, traded, so he's no longer there. Lawrence Guy, a longtime defensive lineman, was released. J.C. Jackson, a cornerback, was released. Devontae Parker signed elsewhere. Mac Wilson Sr., a linebacker, starter for them, who was one of their best players last year. He had an 81.5 grade, 86.9 coverage grade, also had some sacks. So Mac Wilson Sr., the linebacker, was a big loss for them. He went to Arizona, by the way. So get to know him in Arizona. Mike Gesicki, the tight end, left for Cincinnati. Jalen Mills, the safety, left for the Giants, and then Pharaoh Brown, as we mentioned, left for the Seahawks. They also lost Ezekiel Elliott, if you want to mention that as a big one. So some meaningful departures as far as who they added. Anthony Jennings, a linebacker, they signed to a 3-year deal for $12 million. I'm not as familiar with Anthony Jennings. No. It looks like he re-signed. Excuse me. Yeah, those are re-signings. Where are the guys that were net new? Let me go to a different view. Apologies, folks. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So they added. Here we go. They added Jacoby Brissett. We already talked about him. Anthony Jennings, you just mentioned him. Most of what they did was re-sign guys, to be honest. Sione Takitaki, the linebacker from the Browns, they brought in. He is a decent player. Let's take a quick look at what his strengths and weaknesses were for the Browns. He played for the Browns for 5 years, 29 years old, decent coverage grade 70, decent run defense grade 68, not a pass rusher, but, over his career has just been a solid overall linebacker. They signed Austin Hooper to come in at tight end. Antonio Gibson was one of their bigger deals, 3-year deal that could reach $17.25 million. He's a solid physical running back. He's run well against the Seahawks in the past. Again, I mentioned Chukwuna Okorafor, the Steelers tackle that they signed. Armon Watts, they signed as a defensive tackle. And then Nick Leverett and Jalen Hawkins were the other deals that they added. All right. I got to rush here. I got to get to it. But this is a quality defense, strength at the line, inside, outside, good pass rushing crew, good coverage crew, quality linebackers. Gerard Mayo, the new coach, is a defensive coach. So I think you're going to find that. It is worth mentioning their kicking situation last year was very bad. And Chad Ryland, who was the kicker, he only made 64% of his field goals. He missed 5 out of 10 from 40 to 49 yards. He missed 2 under 40 yards. So they're having a kicking competition, and there's no love lost for Chad Ryland. But this is going to be an interesting week 2 matchup. This is as easy of a road opener as you're going to get. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but the Seahawks defense should really be able to step forward against this Patriots offense. The offensive line, if it's in as much disarray as it sounds like, this could be a big game for those guys up front. There could be some opportunities for turnovers. That could be the key to lowering the bar for what the offense has to do to put points on. So, all right, everybody, I got to go work on a trail up north. Wish you all the best. Hope you enjoyed this very quick preview of the week 2 game against the Patriots. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode 112 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody.